Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Good first question here. Yes, that we will have the recording. We'll probably have to edit some stuff on the front end of recording early, but we'll be able to have something to you probably within a few days. For anyone you want to share it with or something you want to review, things like that. So good start. I love the question. So my name is Matt Honeycutt. I'm the account executive for partnership activation and experience at the NAI. Also on our NAI partnerships team is Caitlin Ader. She's our coordinator of partnership activation and experience. So we are excited to bring you and introduce you to Beyond the Athlete. They are the NAI's trusted life after sports partner. They've been partnering with us now for a few months. They're able to have a small session on the front end to our ASA, our group at convention. So they're now excited to connect more with you, our members, and kind of what they're doing. So we have two Alyssas, Alyssa Hermann Alyssa Acompora, who are going to be able to share a lot with you on life after sports and what's missing in athlete support. So I'm going to kick it over to them. They're going to kind of lead and host and manage this workshop. And then as we end, we'll kind of wrap up and see what questions might be out there. So whichever Alyssa wants to take it away can take it away.
I'll be kicking us off. Thanks, Matt. Welcome, everybody. Super stoked to be here. My name is Alyssa Acompora. Like Matt said, I'm coming at you from Long Island, New York. My partner in crime, Alyssa Hermann, is here with me today, and she's coming at you from Chicago, Illinois. So we're both really excited to be here. Together, we are Beyond the Athlete, and this is our Life After Sports What's Missing in Athlete Support webinar. So what's our workshop agenda on the game plan today? So first off, we're going to talk about what changes in life after sports. We're going to talk about gaps in current support systems. We're going to talk about navigating the conversation as a professional from your point of view, as most of you are in this Zoom call. Lastly, we're going to talk about the impact of support both before and after and how we're filling that gap at Beyond the Athlete.
So a little bit about us as an organization. Beyond the Athlete is a coaching service for retiring and former athletes, helping prepare them for life after sport. We have a range of services, but our main focuses are transition readiness. So what is about to happen when you stop playing your last game and you graduate? How can you enter adult life and have structure, continued success, and fulfillment? We do identity development. So who are you outside of your athlete identity? And how can you simultaneously develop your identity as an individual and also apply your athlete mindset in life after sport in a way that is healthy and sustainable? Kind of leaning into that sustainability piece, we also we'll say this in the next slide, but we're registered nurses and can help with the holistic well-being. So lifestyle design, helping develop confidence, exercise, nutrition, and routine creation. All of that happens at Beyond the Athlete. I am the CEO of Beyond the Athlete and the founder. I played soccer. I like to say I will play soccer until I have bilateral hip replacements and have no choice but to stop. It is something I'll do for my whole life. I played NURSA at UF, so go Gators. I'm board certified nurse coach and a registered nurse of over 6 years.
I'm Alyssa Acompora. To distinguish between the two, you can call me Alyssa A. I also go by Liz. I am COO of Beyond the Athlete. I was a Division I swimmer for 4 years and captained my senior year at Fairfield University in Connecticut. I'm also a board certified holistic nurse coach, as well as an ICU nurse of 10 plus years. So fun fact, if you didn't know this already, 100% of athletes will retire and transition out of sport, no matter at the high school, collegiate level, or if you go pro, if you go to the Olympics, if you go to the NFL, all athletes will eventually transition out of sport at some point in their career. And why does transition support matter? Well, a couple of things. First off, 98% of college athletes don't go pro. Many of them have this dream. Many of them work towards that end goal, but only 2% of them actually achieve it. So talking about this transition and being here today is going to really be impactful for the 98% who never transition into a next level. Second of all, 33% of student athletes report depression symptoms within 6 months of graduating. That's a statistic from the NCAA, but we're assuming here that it's not too far off from organizations like the NAIA or NURSA or any other level of athlete. Thirdly, career readiness is emphasized. Coming from a college or university level, most of these student athletes are focused on preparing for their career as far as a job and competing at a level that is still fun and fulfilling for them. But life readiness, whether it's in their health, whether it's in their relationships, whether it's in their mental well-being, emotional well-being, is often under-addressed. And lastly, institutions without structured offboarding may see long-term disengagement from both alumni when they do leave, as well as student athletes. Some student athletes do go through this transition when they are still in college or university settings. And we're going to go into that in a little bit. But if there's no structured offboarding like there is onboarding, they might feel less supported. They might end up transferring schools. They might not live out their school career at the university or college if they don't feel supported. So the end of a sports career represents a potentially vulnerable life transition. When we think life transition, we think about getting married or going through a divorce or some sort of relationship change. We think about buying a house, having children. We think about losing our parents. These are life transitions that are often accepted and talked about in society. But the ending of a competitive sports career is one that is underrepresented. Elite sport culture shapes a student athlete in multiple ways, from perceptions of identity to health behaviors like their habits, their lifestyles, their eating routines. So many things come from the core of being a student athlete. I know for myself, I was a swimmer from the age of 5 up until the day I retired when I was 21 years old. Even after I retired, I introduced myself. I'm a swimmer. To this day, 10 years after being retired from swimming, I still say I used to be a swimmer. So that is such a part of my identity. However, it's not all of who I am. Yet when you talk to me when I was competing, it was all of who I was. I ate swimming. I slept swimming. My friends were from swimming. Everything revolved around swimming. And this is something that's really common in this elite sports culture.
Kind of just like a show of hands, how many of you that are here with us are former athletes? Or you can share it in the chat.
Yes,
as well.
Another swimmer. Nice.
Any other soccer player?
Dennis, awesome. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Basketball, yeah. Oh, I'm sure you relate to a lot of what we're sharing then. Okay, but I will continue on. So we want to touch on the topic of transition theory. Everything that we do with Beyond the Athlete is through this lens. Transition theory was created by Schlossberg. She was I believe, psychologist and created this framework and was an expert on transition. She identified 4 factors that influence a person's ability to cope with transition. These 4 things being the situation, the self, so how are you experiencing it, the support systems you have, and the strategies in place to navigate the transition. For today, so we don't talk for 7 hours straight, we're going to just touch on support and strategy, those 2 components of the Schlossberg's transition theory. Okay, so as I'm sure all of you know, no transition is the same. One teammate might be feeling super excited. They're ready to be done. They're ready for their career. They want to make money. They want to graduate. Whereas someone else, maybe they don't want to leave. And the way you experience, everyone that just shared that they're a former athlete, the way you experienced it is going to be different than the way someone else experienced it, right?
Bring that up that it was a transition.
I don't know who that was. That's okay. And kind of looking at this on a little bit of a deeper level, 2 ways that you can experience transition is predictably or unpredictably. Oftentimes, the ones that we see most often or are more familiar with is the unanticipated transition, things like injury, ineligibility, the unfortunate moment where you have to tell a previous starter that they're no longer going to be starting, or maybe even playing for their final year. There's a lot of support that exists in conversations that occur because most of the time the unanticipated transitions happen before the student athlete has graduated. Whereas anticipated transitions, which occur predictably, are things like graduating, choosing to retire, maybe you transfer schools and you don't want to play anymore. However, a lot of these athletes that graduate predictably have this stop playing predictably have anticipatory grief. So they start thinking about the transition before they actually go through it. And most of the time they go through that alone. Anything to add on this slide list before I move on?
I think you said it pretty well. As far as it, there's how a student athlete copes with all of this is going to be very different. And we're going to get into this in a little bit, but there are different levels of support to offer, no matter if they're excited for the transition or they're really struggling with the transition. There are different levels of support. And just because a student athlete looks excited for it doesn't mean that they're not going through something internally that you might not see. So we're going to dive into that in a little bit. So we recently hosted a webinar, Life After Sports and What Changes in that for Culver Stockton College, one of the NAIA schools. And before we started the workshop and then after we started the workshop, we did an assessment of the student athletes. So pre-session, prior to our webinar with these student athletes, these were some of the quotes in real time that they filled out on our form. So we asked them what they were experiencing or had they thought about this or what they felt. And some of these student athletes mentioned, everything feels normal when playing, but without it, something feels empty. I think about it like letting go of a 20-year career. I get validation based off how I play, so it's something I'm really going to struggle with. I'm going to struggle with feeling like I belong. I have been done with sports for about a year now, and the biggest concerns I've had is how I'm going to stay in the same shape as when I was an athlete. So you can see that some of these student athletes have already started to think about the struggles that are going to come when the time happens and they leave their sport for good. This next slide here, this was post-workshop, and we asked what these students learned. This was a 60-minute webinar, just like we're doing here today. And this is some of the direct impact we've had from just one support session for these student athletes. The feeling is more normal and should be talked about more. How to deal with leaving my nearly lifelong career is one thing they took away from it. There is a way to navigate and to not make life a competition anymore and live a life after sports with relief and making a uniformed life. It's hard to differentiate yourself from your sport, especially when you play your sport in college. Lastly, doing things that serve me and not worrying about other people. So these are what these student athletes took away from just a 60-minute conversation and education session. So hopefully, moving forward as the professionals here, you also have some more tools in the toolbox to start this direct impact from having conversations day to day on campus, day to day at practice, day to day in your offices, and you can start to elevate their well-being in real time.
Yeah, and I'll say it's kind of one of those things that you don't know until you know. And so a lot of these athletes, they expect that because they worked out consistently when they were athletes, that it'll be easy in life after sports. And I know for myself, it was not the case, as well as many other former athletes. They think that it'll be easy to have friends or it'll be easy to have structure because they've always had it, or they're super excited to have no structure and have free time. And then they realize, wait, they don't know what to do with their time and they're overwhelmed. And so there are a lot of things that can be done beforehand to even just start the conversation and start the thought process before all of a sudden they're thrown into life after sports without support systems and they don't know what to do or why they're having a hard time. And that is something that we do tend to see. So what are some things that unprepared athletes have said in life after sports? With Beyond the Athlete, we work with a lot of former athletes. That has been our main population. And here are some submissions from former athletes ranging from like 6 months graduated to 5 years graduated here. One athlete said, I'm feeling quite clueless. I feel guilty about eating too much because I don't exercise the same. They're skipping meals. They're not motivated to go to exercise on their own. And I know when I talked to this person, they were feeling like lower confidence and they were really judging themselves for not doing something that used to be so easy. The next one, this person said they have a health problem right after graduation and it set them back. They don't have a workout plan. The 3 workouts they do have are not beneficial. So even right there, you can see this like not good enough mentality that can sometimes come from being a former athlete. Eating habits are horrid. And then they end this with, I'm a hot mess right now. Haha. Not very haha, but as you can see, there is a struggle here. And then finally, someone said, I miss feeling valuable all the time or just feeling like I have a purpose. The realization that I can never replicate the competition level of playing D1 scares me to my core. So we are seeing, though there's not a ton of literature out, we are seeing that former athletes are really struggling. And not only are they struggling, but they're comparing themselves to their previous athlete selves when they were consistent, when they remember having a community that was close-knit, when they remember having structure. And rather than feeling proud of that experience, they're demonizing it and using it to feel bad about where they are in their current life. Which kind of leads me into this one. Life after sports is so much more than just a career. Former athletes often struggle with identity loss. They struggle with motivations and goals. So maybe they don't even know what it means to have a goal of their own. When you're an athlete, the goals are clear. Win, become better, graduate, get an A, figure out your major, right? Then there's a community and validation. No friend is quite like a teammate. And when you go from having a close-knit group of people who are your ride or dies to moving to a new city, only seeing coworkers besides yourself in the mirror, it's scary. And also, there's not that external validation that you're receiving from coaches, from athletic trainers, from your courses telling you if you literally had passed or failed, right? There's this validation that exists when you're an athlete that doesn't exist in the same way in life after sports. There's a loss of daily structure and routine, a loss of purpose. Physical activity and body image is another struggle in life after sports. There's actually a study that shows being a former athlete does not make you more likely to exercise compared to non-athletes, which is kind of wild, especially because you just expect yourself to do it if it's something you did in the past. And there are other studies that show that the nutrition habits of former athletes are worse and more harmful than non-athletes. And then finally, success metrics. So it's very easy to see what you're doing well when you're an athlete and where there's room to improve. And I think I speak for every single athlete. We are high performers. We're high performance individuals. We want to strive to be the best. We want to be successful. We know what it is to have discipline and be dialed in and support our community and like be the hype person. But when you're an adult, there's no playbook on how to have a happy life. You can the only really place with success metrics is your career. And so what we see are a lot of former athletes who kind of identify as their career. I know myself, I went from introducing myself as a soccer player to introducing myself as a nurse. And there's this lack of understanding of like what the right thing to do is as an adult, leading to a lack of fulfillment. Okay. These shifts are often invisible as well because of the high performance personalities of former athletes and retiring athletes. So you might not always see the struggle, but it's there and it is very impactful. Okay.
I think one thing we have to talk about here is a lot of these student athletes that you are all working with have been competing since their formative years. They have been competing since the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years old. All they know is competition. All they know is sports. And that's something that for their adolescent years, their preteen years into teenage and now adulthood years, was conditioned and formed around sports, around that being an outlet, around that being their safe space, around that being so much of their life. And then one day it's over. And what we see is there's not a lot of conversation around what changes, how to manage that, how to adapt, and all of the emotions that come with it. So first, we're going to talk about how to navigate this conversation as a professional, as all of you are here in this room. So first off, you really want to validate their experience. What do I mean by that? I mean that you want to acknowledge that what they're going through is real, it is normal, and it is important. So we suggest using language like, that makes a lot of sense, or you're definitely not alone in feeling that way. Like Alyssa had just said, we are very used to being strong. We're very used to pushing through pain. We're very used to being high achievers. And we are very used to getting external validation from coaches, from parents, from professors, from even other students who are like, I could never do what you do. It's so challenging to balance a sport and a part-time job and going to school. Wow, you're so tough. So athletes love validation. And if you can validate their experience of transition, that reminds them that it's okay to feel off track during this period of time. Second thing to do here is ask open, curious based questions. So we suggest shifting away from advice giving. And now I know many of us in this room are former athletes ourselves. So it's very easy to come from a place of, I want to help them. I want to lead them. I want to support them. And that comes from a place of, I've been through this before. So let me give you some advice on how I navigated it, or let me give you some advice on how I learned about this. So we like to kind of stray away from the advice giving and instead asking more questions. So use language like, what's felt different for you lately? Or what's part of this that's feeling hardest to replace? This really gives them time and space to reflect on their own experience, and then gives you insight into more of the support that they're going to need moving forward. When they leave this environment, when they leave your little ecosystem in the college or university that you're in, they have to deal with this all themselves. So by asking these open-ended questions, you get them to start thinking, you get them to have more self-awareness, and then that develops their self-efficacy to manage this process a little bit more on their own. The next part here is normalizing this transition. So many athletes think they shouldn't struggle because they were such high performers. They beat themselves up. We see some of this negative self-talk if they start to struggle, if they feel overwhelmed or anxious or scared about what's to come, about the unknown, about the future. They don't see this as normal because they've been always somebody who's got a challenge thrown at them and they've been able to adapt. They don't score the game-winning point. They go in the gym and they keep practicing until they do score it. So they think that they shouldn't struggle. But if you, as the professional, remind them it's okay to feel lost, this is a big life change, you remove this shame and you create more space for growth. You show them that this is not something to feel guilty about or to feel shameful about or to beat yourself up about. This is something to explore a little bit more deeply, and that will help lead to growth down the line. Lastly, know how and when to refer out. So this arguably might be the most important thing to hear here, because some of these student athletes are going to struggle more than others. Some of them are going to need professional support. We have had student athletes and former athletes come to us and say this transition is harder than losing a loved one. This transition is worse than the hardest breakup they've ever been through. The grief is so real. So some of them might start to show signs of depression, anxiety. That is a time for you to refer out to maybe a mental health provider if you have it at your university or your college. If they're showing signs of crisis, trauma, or other signs of mental health illness, that is a sign to refer out. There are then these athletes who you might not be able to support them to the utmost capacity because obviously this is not your job role. You have a lot more things on your plate. So if they keep coming to you for more and more support than you're able to give, that's another point to be able to refer them out. And if maybe you don't have the sports psychologist, you don't have the mental health provider, you now have the NAIA Life After Sports coaching partners. So we're going to give you some of our information at the end of this that you can always refer them to us, or you can come to us directly and ask us questions. One piece of advice, and I said we don't love giving advice, but a suggestion here to use for you in your toolbox, some language around this is, I care about you, I care about your future, and this might be something that another professional could really help you with. Would you be open to talking to someone about that? And that kind of doesn't make them feel, like they're doing something wrong or that it's scary and big to talk about this. This shows that you want to help them.
All right.
So what support currently looks like, what's typically available to student athletes at this time. Like Alyssa Hermann had identified, there's not a ton of research on this just yet, but we are seeing more and more articles. Ironically, we've had a lot of students in grad school come to us at Beyond the Athlete and want to do research with us because they are starting to see how important it is talking about nutrition. Fun fact, the NFL, the Olympics, all of these super elite pro programs have transition support. it's being missed at this collegiate level. And what support currently looks like is usually academic advising. So you have the support for grades and for school. You have career services, the career center on how to write a resume and how to use your skills and how to build a LinkedIn. There's also eligibility tracking. A ton of student athletes we've got onto calls with have talked about the portal and all of these different things. They know a lot about the school aspect, the academic aspect, the transferring portal, the eligibility tracking, their stats as an athlete. Lastly, the support might be counseling. It depends on budgets and just, I think, the support that you have at your schools, if this is available to you. But we are seeing it become more common to have sports psychologists on staff, to have mental health counselors on staff. And that is great. But what happens for the rest of their life? What happens when they graduate and no longer have accessibility to the mental health counselor they got so close with after 4 years, or the athletic trainer they worked with and confided in and trusted in? What happens when so many things are left unanswered? There are limited services around this transition.
Yeah, so some current gaps that we see in the current athlete development models are an absence of structured guidance for routine building and life design. The workshop I did at the convention the other weekend was how to build structure and routine in life after sports. I wish I had a photo of the way these athletes' eyes looked at me when I put my time blocked calendar on the screen. One of the practices that we did was envisioning what they want like the career they want, putting that on the calendar and looking at the other free time they had and structuring it. And it was really overwhelming for them, but it was a great experience because they got to do it where there's zero strings attached. If you can't figure out where the fitness goes, well, you still have your team. When you're an adult, that's not the case. So there's not a whole lot that exists holistically at the collegiate level. There's also a lot of limited support for post-sport identity reconstruction. Thinking back to that Schlossberg model that we mentioned earlier and the unpredicted transition out of sports. These are the injured athletes. A lot of these injured athletes are having these conversations, but the athletes who know their time is coming, their fourth years, fifth years, for some of them, sixth years, they are having this anticipatory grief. They are starting to grieve for the thing they're losing before they actually leave the environment. There is a unique opportunity there to provide them the skills and support to be able to transition and have less struggle on their own. But that's not really happening at the level that would truly create lasting impact. And then finally, there's inadequate space for emotional processing of sports-related loss. What we've seen is that the universities and colleges that do have the mental health professionals on campus, it's usually one. There's one or two for all of these athletes. Most of them are not talking about this. Most of them may not even realize what it is they're losing because no one's starting the conversation and they don't know what questions to ask. And so what we're seeing is that the schools that have something in place they don't even have the capacity to have this conversation because of how many other conversations are going on. Okay. And why this matters. Well, what we see is that athletes who do not have support who leave, they end up feeling isolated. They feel disconnected from their campus, from the alumni networks. I know when I remember vividly how it felt to be kicked out of my team group chats. All of a sudden, these people that I were with all the time, I was still in my college town. I still saw them sometimes on the weekends, but I was no longer part of this close-knit community, and it was very isolating. I also never received support from my school about life after sports, and I was bitter about it for a couple of years. When they would reach out to me, it would only be to reach out to ask for a donation. And it definitely rubbed me the wrong way because I struggled as a senior, balancing nursing school, balancing a job, balancing my sport. And I really didn't know that I was struggling any more than anyone else. And no one really talked about it with me. Finally, delayed personal and professional growth. If you're like, I like to equate this to being stuck in the ocean. If you are dropped in the ocean and you're barely keeping your head above water, you're not going to be worried about looking for the island or taking in the sunshine. You're just trying to keep your head above water. And so a lot of these former athletes, they go into life after sports and they're just keeping their head above water. They're not thinking about applying their athlete mindset. They're not thinking about even goals outside of work. They're just trying to keep up. This delays professional growth. If you don't feel confident to ask for a raise, you're not going to ask for a raise. If you don't feel confident to leave a job you're not fulfilled in, you can end up burnt out in your daily life. And so this is what we're seeing with former athletes who maybe never had the conversation about what changes when you're no longer competing at a high level. And then there's that experiential emotional burnout and the reduced self-efficacy. They don't know what it is to seek support. They've always had structure. They always were kind of told what goals to have. And so the only answer these former athletes have to that is, well, I need to work harder because that's what got me results when I was an athlete. And so they end up burning themselves completely out, working out 7 days a week in the gym, some of them, like restricting their meals, working as hard as they can to go up the career ladder, trying to replace sports. And then they end up not feeling fulfilled in any area of life. Whereas these former athletes who are given support and athletes that are given support, they do feel confident leaving. They understand that the skills they built as athletes are their skills, not their athlete identity skills. And sports was just the environment in which they got to create those skills and apply them. They also can have momentum. So if the conversation and structure is put in place before they graduate, they can continue to have that structure and routine when they leave. And they are more likely to maybe build a business or to go to the gym class for the first time by themselves, which they've never had to do. There's this, again, going into the next one, self-ownership of their experience. So if they're not having a good time, they're willing to leave. If they don't like something, they have the self-awareness to think about, well, what don't I like? Or if they do like something, how can I replicate this on a deeper level? What part of sports did I love the most? And how can I seek those things out in my life now? These are things that if that idea isn't kind of dropped in them before they leave, they just don't know what to do. And it can be very overwhelming to go from a space where you are top dog to a space where you don't know anyone and you're not sure how to develop your own routine. I feel like that sounds so morbid.
I think just one thing to add there, Alyssa, is around that also starts to create internal validation over external validation. That's something that I think I speak for both of us here. When we went into careers as nurses, I went right into the ICU. I thought I could copy and paste my whole life from sports into my ICU nursing career. And I was looking for the external validation and the trophy and the medal and people telling me I'm doing a good job. And the day after day after day that I didn't get that, or the patient I wasn't able to save, or the crisis that happened because there was something hard at work, I didn't have the internal validation to support myself. I was looking for it externally. I didn't have the self-ownership. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have any of that to realize what was happening in my ICU nurse career. So that's something that we see very, very frequently. And having these conversations, supporting them, creating space for them will start to help them rely more on themselves over this external validation that they've relied on for years.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. Ooh, we're almost there. So some questions that you can ask yourself in this moment is, how is life readiness beyond career readiness reflected in current athlete development strategies at your institution? How are you as an individual doing it? How is your team doing it? How is the institution itself? Is there anything going on? What does that look like? And then finally, what legacy does your program leave for athletes when their jersey comes off? Institutions that build intentional offboarding support, you get to signal to your athletes, hey, you matter beyond your performance. You matter beyond your performance as an athlete, as you matter beyond your grades. You matter beyond your career choice. You matter beyond your graduate degree. You matter as a human being. And here are the ways that you can continue to be supported when you leave. Okay, so we're going to get into some case studies. I feel like we should have said this in the beginning, but if you have questions as we're talking, please drop them in the chat. We also will have a Q&A at the end, but just kind of emphasizing, because the only face I see is the other Alyssa and my own, so I don't know how engaged you all are. And if not, no big deal. Okay.
So these are some real-time case studies for you to start to think about and start turning the wheels if you've experienced these with student athletes before. We'll give you two different scenarios. So the first one is going to be scenario one. It's going to be Taylor. So Taylor is that starting volleyball player. It's her senior year. She's always been a top dog. She's always given 100% effort. And what her coach started to see was Taylor started skipping the optional practices when for 4 years, Taylor was the one who showed up early and left late to those optional practices. She started skipping them. She wasn't leading the warm-ups like usual. She wasn't engaged with her teammates as much as she had been. And when asked and approached by her coach about this, her response was, I'm just tired from finals. I'm just have senioritis. And that became the common explanation for Taylor. But what was actually happening underneath the surface? Taylor was starting to grieve the loss of her athlete identity before her last game even started. And she didn't know what she was going to do when it was over. This is a very common theme and scenario. That anticipatory grief. It's coming to an end. Who am I going to be without this? What am I going to do without this? All of this was going on in Taylor's mind between her two ears, but she was not comfortable to verbalize this to anybody. She was afraid to say she was struggling because she didn't want to seem weak, because she was the star volleyball player, because she was always the leader, because she was always strong. She did not want to show anybody that she was struggling behind the scenes. What do we call this? We call this the quiet disconnect. So she started to more slowly disengage, not be as present. So what helped in this scenario? Well, that coach approached her again and she simply asked how she felt about the upcoming end of the season. This created space for Taylor. When Taylor started to open up, the coach was like, okay, this is more than I can handle. This is more deeply than I've even anticipated. I'm going to refer her to the sports psychologist. I'm going to refer her to the mental health counselor. And with that support, Taylor then went on to create a plan. She started to ask the questions of who am I after volleyball? And without being scared or fearful about those answers, she was able to discover and be excited about her new life after graduation. And lastly, she started unpacking that identity outside of sport. With the raise of hand here or dropping in the chat, has anybody seen this scenario with a student athlete they've come into contact with recently, where they are really engaged for most of their athletic career and then it's time to end, and then they slowly trickle away and they are seniors and they want to be involved in all the other extracurriculars and they're just not as present? Yes, COVID athletes, huge. COVID changed the game for support, and a lot of mental health, which we love, came out of COVID, which is huge. But there's also a lot of gaps, like we spoke about, besides just the extreme mental health pendulum swings that we have to address here.
Yeah. And then the question, do males and females differ in the way they deal with these feelings? Do you want to answer? I can answer my experience after.
Yes, I think they do. Females tend to be a little bit more emotionally vulnerable, and you might see them express their emotions a little bit more readily, whether it be crying, whether it be getting frustrated. I would say males, from what I've seen, they're closed off. They wear that suit of armor, and you might not pick up on any of the signs, or they might just get more quiet, more disconnected, almost like this athlete, Taylor.
Yeah, and that's kind of my experience too. And specifically with former athletes, we see the way that I often see former male athletes cope with this loss is actually by overcompensating in the areas they're worried about. So rather than addressing the identity loss or struggle, they double down on the athlete identity. They start thinking about going pro when like maybe they weren't even starting on the team that they were on in college, or when they're in their life after sport, they're reminiscing on the good days as an athlete. They haven't quite moved through the experience of the identity loss. They're still kind of holding on to the experience they had as an athlete. And so they also like I'll also see a lot of male athletes really worry about like staying fit. That was something that came up even at the with the ASA when I asked what they were most worried about. And this isn't how I would word this. This is a quote, but it was like, I am scared of getting fat. That was like four of them said it, and it was four males who said it like that. And it was wonderful to watch one of the female athletes of the leadership say, you want to start focusing on fitness in a way that like what feels good. What do you enjoy about it? And your body will change, like it is going to change. And so that's something that we see a lot. There's a little bit less self-awareness around the transition when it comes to the male athletes. Does that answer the question the way that you were hoping? Or is there any follow-up question? Give it like 2 seconds. Okay. Want to continue?
Sure.
Okay.
You can always come back to that at the end too.
Yeah.
Okay. He said it makes great sense.
Amazing.
Great. Okay. Scenario 2, we have Erin. So Erin is the soccer team captain, all-American, graduated with honors, 4.0 student, seems to do it all the time. Erin had a pretty close relationship with the athletic trainer from a previous injury a couple of years ago. And on the surface level, Erin seemed fine. She still got into the training room. She was doing all her exercises, busy as ever, checking all the boxes, working out consistently, no injuries, no complaints, always polite, always put together. Looked like this girl could do it all, superhuman. But what was actually happening? Erin was spiraling internally. She was always moving on to the next thing, always trying to prove herself, never truly fulfilled, never proud of herself, always beating herself up. And that's why she was always adding more to her plate, because she felt like she was never doing enough. Without the structure of sport, without a coach or a trainer or an athletic director saying, hey, Erin, you might be doing too much. You might have to slow down. This might not end well. She didn't know how to slow down. She didn't have any support to call her out. So she began to experience burnout, and she didn't know how to ask for help. She thought this was normal. This is the high achiever hitting a wall. You will see this time and time again with your student athletes who try and do it all, and then they eventually hit their threshold. So this athletic trainer who had worked with Erin for years asked, how are you adjusting to life? How are you adjusting to life without the soccer schedule? Are you trying to add more to your plate to overcompensate, or are you giving yourself some space to slow down, to take a break, to just enjoy life? And this cracked open that much needed conversation. The athletic trainer connected her with, wow, lo and behold, beyond the athlete. And Erin was able to redefine success in a healthy, more sustainable manner.
All right. Only like 2-3 more slides and we'll get into like the open floor. We would love to see some faces at that point and answer any other questions if there are any, but kind of continuing. So what is the correct role that professionals should play? Well, we're learning in real time the true effects that retiring from athletics can cause for months and even years after graduating. It really was shown during the pandemic when athletes had to stop in the middle of the season, right? That was unanticipated retirement for a lot of former athletes and athletes who ended up coming back, but still you could see the gaping hole. And because of that, there is a big push in research showing the effects of not having support as you transition. And of course, we see this with the greats, with the post-Olympic depression, NFL athletes going bankrupt as soon as they stop playing, even though they had multi-million-dollar contracts. And this is, our perspective. Educating and supporting life after sports outside of career preparation is treating the whole athlete, the whole person. And if you ask us, well, we think that that's the right way to play. Not sassy. Okay, so if you're not sure where to start, we really, really want to encourage you to book a 30-minute call with us. We'll assess your individual school to see what your current support is, what your climate is, and how we can either move forward in terms of the team resources, seeing what your actual vision is for the athlete development, and what your unique needs are of the population of athletes that you serve. I also want to emphasize that Liz and I, the most important thing to us are that these athletes have support. So whether you're just curious about how you can implement it yourself, you want to learn more as an individual, or you want to co-create a plan with some of our services, whatever is okay. If you're asking the questions, we want to answer and we want to be there to help build it with you. These are some examples of the services that we offer. We have already built a Life After Sports course that's self-paced. We do webinars, obviously, master classes that can be tailored to the desires of your school. We do in-person offboarding incentives as well as mentorship groups. If you want to have a conversation, the link is in the chat. I think we put it through June. But again, the most important thing is that your athletes are getting support. And these are examples of what our resources are like. We're open to tailoring based on the needs of your school. Anything to add here, Liz?
No, I think we're all good. We will share, obviously this recording is going to be shared as it was identified in the chat and at the beginning. We can share the slide deck if anybody's interested in that. And then lastly, one of the slides, we had that navigating the conversation where I went in through validating their experience all the way into knowing how and when to refer out. We do have that image too, which I can drop in the Zoom chat after this or right now. So you can save that to your desktop just as a reminder for yourself, kind of in the steps of how to start this conversation. Final takeaways here when it comes to supporting your student athletes. Number one, life after sports is a whole life transition, not just a career shift. I don't think we can say that one more time. We've said it enough here. Number two, support doesn't have to be complex. It just really needs to be intentional and ongoing. So whatever you start now, if you start it now, that is the beginning and planting the seed for these student athletes for years to come, which will be so beneficial and impactful in the long run. Lastly, you can make a difference. Even small conversations, small little couple 5-minute exchanges helps athletes feel seen, supported, heard, understood, all of these things. And like we said, that is the most important thing to us at Beyond the Athlete. We know from our own life experience and from doing the work over the last 2.5 years that so many people have felt alone throughout this. And if you can have one student athlete not feel that way, I think for all of us in the room, that's a positive. That's a job well done. Okay, we'll give some time for questions. Thank you everyone for sticking with us. We know that stuff is really dense. But here for some conversation, I'm going to drop the image that I was talking about in the chat. And then if anyone's going to drop off now, you don't want to be here for the Q&A, we do have a feedback form. We would love to hear from you just so we can improve our services, our content. It'd really be beneficial just for us moving forward.
Please fill it out. Mostly because it helps us tailor these a little more, but also because we love the external validation. We are, at the end of the day, former athletes ourselves.
Hey, how much does it cost to have a half an hour with your team?
The consultation
we recently,
call. Yes.
That's free. Oh, that's free.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
Thank you. What else, if anything?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Just want to say thank you. I think this space is absolutely critical, just from my own personal experience and then just as a coach for the last 15 years. This is what our athletes need, and it's not optional. It's something that they're all going to encounter, and it's so important. Instead of replacing what they're doing with other activities and then finding out 10 years later that it's not working, and after failed career paths and relationships, man, like, let's get ahead of this and let's support them as much as we can. And I love this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Jill. Yeah, 10 years. I tried to quit my nursing job twice. It was right at that 8-year mark because I realized that it was not it. And relationships, so much like you identified. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, athletes are lucky to have you as a coach.
Well,
Ooh, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
No, I don't want to wrap it up. We still got time. So I from the NAIA, I want to thank everyone for joining. I want to thank both Alyssa's for the great information. I think everyone on this and people not on this, members and others, know that it is a need. It isn't just a, oh, we gotta, oh, it'd be nice to have. It's becoming a need to have, and something that we're seeing more and more. And the NAI national office is hearing from our members of, these student athletes need support. And we always want institutions to be able to do what they can do, but we're trying to listen to you all as members, who need the support and need something for their athletes to say, I can't do this on my own. I need resources. I need something I can at least provide them to get them started on the right foot as they're transitioning. So, again, I appreciate the members here on the call, and I appreciate both Alyssa's. So, yeah, if there is more questions, great. Or Alyssa, if you have something to kind of chime in with, please do.
I was just going to start riffing. I was going to start asking myself questions and answering them. So, like, what are questions I normally ask?
I have a quick question for you. I know you mentioned Culver Stockton. You did a presentation, so I'm assuming there's a cost to, as we move forward with all those kinds of things that you would look to do for a campus. Is it just a presentation? Did Culver Stockton sign on for more? What was the behind all that?
Yeah, I can tell you. So Culver Stockton, they did it was 90-minute workshop on what changes in life after sport. We did the pre and post session, and they also Jill, the counselor there, she's first of all amazing. Shout out to Jill. But she is going to put it on their school's website as a resource, and it can live on there for however long she wants it to live on there. So we did the 90-minute workshop with her for $500 for like a number context. I will say we sent out an email, I don't know when this was, like 6 weeks ago. We recognize that finances are like the biggest barrier, right? If we all had $1 million, we would do whatever we wanted with it. And a lot of that would be given right back to the athletes. And so we had sent out, like, we want to find a way to provide something that works for you within your budget. And what can we do now to ensure that it's in the budget for years to come? And so we recognize that's a conversation, and we want to have the conversation.
So timeline of these, pieces, I kind of think through of like, okay, well, we're at the end of a semester now, but what is the timeline? Okay, the beginning of fall, we all, just your guys' recommendation on that.
Like, when should you have it? Oh, sorry, Liz.
Yeah, no, yeah, just in general, and I know at any time starting the conversation about, athletes understanding when, they're done playing and how that piece is going to feel and do. But in general, just doing if you were going to do our entire athletic department presentation, when is the benefit? When would you see the benefit? Like, I would see, like, everybody's in their senior year, their last year, you're starting prior to that, early on versus late in the semester kind of thing. I don't know how you guys view it.
I would chime in and say I would say that March, April is probably the sweet spot to really think about it, because even if you have your athletes who are returning, that summertime for them is also when we see a lot of these mindsets come out, right? They're not in the environment that they were. They are leading into these all or nothing mentalities, or they're not doing their training packets, or they're not having their teammates around them, and they're getting into some disordered eating, or they're getting into body image things, or they're not exercising. So I think leading up to that break period, regardless of if they're graduating or if they're coming back for the next season, is a great time to start planting the seed. However, any earlier than that, so you start in the fall, what we've recognized and what we've recognized from the Culver Stockton is some of these athletes still don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. Even if they don't want to hear it, we don't take it as doesn't.
They need to hear it, though.
They need to hear it, no, regardless. Yeah. But they don't pay attention. They don't engage. They don't have the intention as much as if they did, I think, in the springtime.
So, who did Culver have involved in the presentation?
Culver had freshmen through seniors. They opened it up to everybody. They did a couple of things. It was only Alyssa and I. We did the whole webinar. Jill is their mental health support counselor for athletics. And she said, this is way more than I can't, this is more than I can chew. Like, I want to talk about this, but I'm one person. So we had a whole presentation already, and we did it for her. It was just her and I leading, Alyssa and I. And we had about what, 50 athletes on. They made it an ACE required event, which was a way to get more of these student athletes on the Zoom webinar. They got some sort of like credit. They had to do like a community service hour or something, and she got it approved through the school. So that also made them want to come and show up, which helped with engagement. I think moving forward, what we learned, and after Alyssa went to convention in San Diego with the routine portion of the workshop, more tangible skills is something we want to start to implement. And if there can be some sort of follow-up, right? Like, we give them tangible tools to implement. How do we follow up, or how do you follow up with these student athletes and make sure that this is something that they're benefiting from and using? Because you have a really safe ecosystem. We don't want to cross any lines or boundaries with the safety of the university and college. So it doesn't maybe make sense for us to follow up. Obviously we're new to partnership here, so that's why the 30-minute calls would benefit, I think, all of your institutions as well as us, to find what is going to be the most impactful and the most financially sound and all of that moving forward.
So you would suggest that you check back in with students that have graduated and seeing how they're doing?
Oh yeah.
Would love that. We talked with a couple of NCAA schools that do have programs, these really elite, you're talking University of Michigan, University of Washington, who just have bigger budgets. Some of them do have programs. And what they said is they have a lot of alumni coming back and still wanting support that they are unable to give because they're no longer attached to the university. They're no longer students there. So these people who've run these programs can no longer help them, even though these athletes are coming back and asking for support.
Yeah, so another world, this is just like a side note, but we're definitely over the summer when we have capacity are going to look at how we can support alumni in like the alumni and alumni associations as well, because there are more former athletes in the world than there are athletes in the world, and a lot of them are having a hard time.
I got to pop off. Thank you guys. You guys did a great job.
Of course, schedule a call. We'd love to talk deeper with you.
Well, thank you again, Alyssa and Alyssa, for doing this. Sorry I'm not on camera, by the way. I'm at home with internet connectivity issues, and I guarantee if I turn this camera on, I'm gonna get kicked off. So
No problem.
thank you all that could join as well. As we've said a few times, we'll be able to provide you the recording. We kind of get it to our multimedia team to, have it good at the end and beginning, and then we'll get it out to you all here within a couple days. If you have any questions, like I said, they drop their information, book a call. If for some reason, through all the different forms of communication, you're just not sure who to reach out to, you can always reach out to myself or Caitlin as well, and we're happy to connect you with whoever you need to be connected with. So thank you all again for joining. Appreciate your time and appreciate Alyssa and Alyssa's time as well.
Yeah, thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff.
Thanks.